Then came the wagons with the spoils of war from Marcomania. The representations of the conquered peoples were impressive, as were the trophies made of captured enemy weapons, armour and standards, but only a fool would believe those chests to be full of gold, especially given the meagre praetorian escort they enjoyed. Besides, those of us who had been in Windobina knew well that we paid money to end the war, rather than reaping it as a reward. Flautists came next, their more delicate melody largely drowned out by the blaring of the horns, the rumbling of the wagons and the cheering of the crowd, especially at a distance. They were followed by the white sacrificial oxen, then the great black Oroxis, brought back across the Danubius. A small group came next bearing banners, and 3 golden crowns purported to be those of the Marcomanni, the Quadi, and the Iazyges. I doubt any of their kings ever wore such a crown, and they certainly didn't use banners like that, but the Roman crowd were largely unaware of such minor trickery and roared as they passed. Hundreds of downtrodden prisoners came next, eyes lowered as they stumbled, pelted with fruit, vegetables, and far, far worse by the jeering crowds. Finally, the grand heart of the triumph passed. 24 lictors, bearing their fasces, preceded the imperial chariot. I could see Commodus, tall, golden and impressive, in his purple and gold toga, and I could almost make out the face of Sauterus, who rode alongside him, holding the victor's wreath above the emperor's head. Behind them would come the military contingent, which interested me not a jot, having spent years watching such a spectacle in the north and the east. Besides, my attention was distracted then. Sauterus's presence in the chariot was not universally approved of, you see. A slave standing behind the emperor and holding aloft the wreath, yes, was traditional. A freedman standing alongside the emperor was another thing entirely. It was almost a declaration of the relative importance of freed men to this new emperor who shunned the senatorial advisers of his father. I could pick out the occasional barbed remark about the arrangement from the nobles among whom I stood, but one voice in particular I recognised, and it made me turn from the great spectacle and look along the walkway. "Disgraceful," sneered Lucilla from where she stood with her children and a few of her closer friends, surrounded by her own guards who kept the hoi polloi away. "Appalling," agreed Quadratus, drifting through the crowd to join her. The former Empress's guards let the man pass without question, I noted with interest. "How can my idiot brother allow such a thing? Has he no shame? Does he not realise how this looks to his fellow senators?" she replied, icy and bitter. I peered around those self-same senators. I can imagine that Commodus did not overly care what they thought. He was his uncle's nephew more than his father's son. And as for fellow senators, had any emperor since Tiberius even attempted to maintain that ridiculous fiction of equality? Whatever else they had to say was lost beneath the arrival of the military in the wake of the imperial chariot. The trump of thousands of nailed boots made conversation and eavesdropping difficult to say the least, though I watched those two engaged in some sort of private confab for a few moments, my suspicions continuing to get the better of me. It was only some preternatural sense that tore my attention from them, for I felt drawn to look the other way for some reason. I can only see God's hand in that, for the walkway was crowded and I'd heard nothing. Yet I turned on instinct, my gaze piercing the mass like an arrow and thudding home into 2 more figures standing together in conversation, almost mirroring that from which I'd turned. Cleander and a man in the uniform of one of the most senior officers in the Praetorian Guard. What that could be about, I had no idea, but whatever it was, I felt certain it would not be good. A treacherous snake and a Praetorian officer on one side, a disaffected princess and an ambitious courtier on the other. Suddenly, I felt a lot colder than the weather demanded. I did not enjoy the rest of the day, as I'd hoped. There were fights in the arena and races in the circus. A celebrated theatrical troupe performed Plautus to great applause. I was present at them all, and, without the disapproval of Mother hanging over me, I could have enjoyed them. But I did not. In fact, I spent most of the day spying out Cleander, Quadratus, Lucilla, and that Praetorian officer, who were often in evidence around the celebrations. I did not witness them looking quite so conspiratorial for the rest.